Early childhood is sometimes referred to as the preschool years. This is a period of the lifespan after infancy and before the child begins formal schooling. This is typically from ages 3 to 5 or 2 to 6 years. First, let's examine physical growth. There's considerable difference in the body proportions of a child entering and exiting this stage. Toddlers have large heads and stomachs and short arms and legs, but 6-year-old children tend to have longer, leaner bodies as their torso lengthens. The rate of physical growth in early childhood is slower than what was found in infancy. Overall, physical growth is at the rate of about 3 inches in height per year, and about 4.5 pounds of weight is gained each year. The average 6-year-old in the United States is about 46 inches tall and weighs about 46 pounds. This slower growth rate translates into smaller appetites for children between the ages of 2 and 6. This diminished appetite means these children are vulnerable to nutritional deficiencies. This is particularly true if those small appetites are satisfied with foods poor in nutrition. Preschoolers can suffer iron deficiencies, particularly if they drink too much cow's milk, which interferes with the body's ability to absorb iron. Children in the United States consume too many high-fat, high-sugar junk foods. And while the effects of such poor nutrition might not be immediately evident, the preference for eating such intensely sugary and fatty foods is being established and can interfere with nutrition for years to come. How can you avoid setting up eating problems with this age group? The following tips are directed toward establishing reasonable expectations about food and avoiding associating food with psychological needs. These are some particular concerns in the United States. First, don't try to force feed your child or fight with him over food. Recognize that appetites vary and adjust accordingly. Keep mealtime pleasant and as a time for family members to reunite and enjoy one another's company. Don't become a short-order chef. Choose a reasonable menu that all can share. Limit choices, particularly when allowing young children to make selections. Too many options can be confusing. Serve balanced meals. Take the time to think about nutrition and prepare meals that are healthy. Don't bribe the child with food. Offering certain foods as rewards can set up a hierarchy of food that's good and bad, which can get in the way of eating healthy meals. Now let's turn our attention to the brain. During early childhood, the brain continues to grow and mature. At age 2, the brain is 75% its adult weight. By age 6, it's at 95% its adult weight. And by 7, the brain is about 100% its adult weight. Changes in the child's ability to override emotional outbursts and to coordinate movement are seen as the cortex continues to mature. Visual pathways continue to be established, and the child becomes able to reproduce what is seen on paper when drawing. The left hemisphere of the brain undergoes a growth spurt between the ages of 3 and 6, facilitating language skills. The right hemisphere grows throughout childhood, improving spatial skills and the recognition of shapes and patterns. The corpus callosum also grows between ages 3 and 6. Gross motor skill development occupies much of the life of a young child. Running and jumping, swinging, and learning to ride a bicycle are all examples of gross motor skills. Many childhood songs combine music and words with large physical movements. Can you think of any examples? How about head and shoulders, knees and toes? Remember that one? Young children are also practicing their fine motor skills by learning to pour, using scissors, and coloring. Early childhood classrooms include a number of activities for improving fine motor skills. Many songs and children's activities incorporate fine motor skills. Have you ever heard the song Itsy Bitsy Spider? Well, you'll find a video of it being performed in your lesson. Enjoy. Now we start the story of sexual development. Sexual development begins even before birth. Erections and vaginal lubrication are present before birth. In infancies, babies stimulate their genitals when they have sufficient motor skills. Their curiosity about the genitals continues in early childhood. However, this curiosity is met with hopefully this curiosity is met with a reasonable response rather than one that evokes shame or fear. Let's continue our look at cognitive development. Here's a picture of Piaget. Recall Piaget's second stage of cognitive development, pre-operational intelligence. Early childhood is a time of learning to use thought to solve problems and learning to know and communicate about the world through the use of symbols, primarily language. Now the child can think about what happened several days ago or imagine an event. Watch closely and you may see a child surprised at being able to hear a song in their head. Wow, I can hear a song and it's playing in my head. Being able to think about the world in this new way doesn't mean that a child is logical about how the world works. Pre-operational thought is pre-logical or before logic. Instead, there may be a tendency to believe that everyone sees the world through the child's eyes. I'll give you an example. A child came up to me around Halloween in October and said, "I know why God put skin on people." "Oh, really? Why?" I responded. And the child proudly reported, "So they won't be scary to little kids." Here are some other aspects of pre-operational thought. Children love to play out roles at this stage. This type of play, called sociodramatic play, allows them to take on a role fully and to think about how to speak and act as well as what kinds of props are needed to become the part. Syncretism refers to thinking that if two events occur simultaneously, one must have caused the other. Here's an image of a hospital. A child whose mother brought a baby with her when she last left the hospital may think that a new visit to the same building will produce another child. Egocentrism is one of Piaget's early concepts that refers to how children assume that everyone thinks the way they do. Try reading a book to a child and they may ask, "Where am I in the story?" They believe that they are at the center of activity. Or you may have heard a child ask whether a character in a movie or cartoon loves them. That's an odd question, unless you're a 3-year-old. Animism is the thought that objects have lifelike qualities. Be sure to watch the video clip in your lesson. It's an attempt to help young children distinguish between living and non-living objects. Piaget challenged children's ability to understand how to classify objects. For example, in this image showing numerous red buttons and a single green button, you have objects that can be classified in several ways. If you ask a 3-year-old, what are there more of? Red things, green things, or buttons? The child will probably respond, red things, not recognizing that all are buttons. Piaget's experiments on conservation of matter indicated that children have numerous misconceptions about matter. For example, if a container of water is poured into two differently shaped containers so that the water levels now vary, the child may think that the higher water level indicates more liquid. Or a child may think that if one line moves farther to the right, it's more. Or if one row of pennies is widely spaced apart, it has more. The theory of mind is the understanding that other people have different thoughts than one's own. This realization replaces egocentrism and occurs between the ages of 3 and 5, typically at around age 4. This knowledge of others' mental states can aid in social relationships. It serves as our everyday mind reading. It can be absent or difficult for children with autistic spectrum disorders. Such children may not be able to appreciate others' mental states, depending on the level of severity of the disorder. Vocabulary grows at the rate of about 10 to 20 new words per day, and the child has a vocabulary of about 10,000 words by age 6. However, children do not have a complete understanding of words. For example, a child may not understand that the expression "time flies" simply means that time passes quickly. Children tend to learn nouns more easily than verbs, even in more verb-friendly languages such as Chinese. Rules of grammar may be misapplied. An example of such over-regularization is found in statements such as, "I goed there," or "I doed that," in which adding ed to the end of the word is used to indicate past tense incorrectly. Remember Vygotsky's zone of proximal development? This is the potential a child may achieve through guided participation. Language, both verbal and nonverbal, is the vehicle of this guidance. Do you ever talk to yourself? When? Why? Chances are you talk to yourself as an adult only when you want to express an emotion or clarify your thoughts. This inner speech is not the same as the speech you use when communicating with others. It's short and to the point. But when you were learning to use language, you may have struggled as you began to use words to communicate ideas to others. You probably spoke aloud. Then, words became directed toward your own behavior. You may have talked to yourself with a sort of running commentary about your own activities and feelings as you learned to think using words. Gradually, this egocentric speech, spoken when alone, becomes private speech or thinking in language. Inner speech is only spoken aloud if thoughts need to be clarified or emotion expressed. Think about it. Did you use your words? Now we turn our attention toward psychosocial development in early childhood. We'll explore self-concept, gender identity, and family life. A self-concept is one's own perception of self, or image of self. We aren't born with a self-concept. It develops through interaction with others. Usually these others are those close to us, like siblings, parents, or peers. Let's look at two theories of self based on interaction. Charles Horton Cooley used the metaphor of a mirror or looking glass when describing this process. Our self-concept develops when we look at how those around us respond to us. How we look, what we say, and what we do. We then use their reactions to make self-judgments. If those around us respond favorably to us, we'll form a positive sense of self. But if those around us respond with criticism and insult, we interpret that as evidence that we're not good or acceptable. But those around us may respond to us based on more than our own performance or worth. Perhaps they don't notice what we do well or are reluctant to comment on it. As a result, we may have an inaccurate self-concept. And there may certainly be periods in life in which we are more self-conscious or concerned with how others view us. Early childhood may be one of those times, as children are piecing together a sense of self. George Herbert Mead also focused on social interaction as important for developing a sense of self. He divided the self into two parts, the I, or the spontaneous part of the self that's creative and internally motivated, and the me, or the part of the self that takes into account what other people think. The key to living well is to find ways to give expression to the I with the approval of the me. In other words, find out how to be creative and to do what you care about from within, but operate within the guidelines of society. The I is inborn, but the me develops through social interaction in a process called taking the role of the other. A child first comes to take the role of a significant other person, typically a parent or sibling. A child who's been told not to do something may be found saying no to himself. Gradually, the child will come to understand how the generalized other, or society at large, comes to view actions. Now, a behavior is not just wrong according to a significant other person. It is wrong as a rule of society. In this way, cultural expectations become part of the judgment of self. Early self-concepts can be quite exaggerated. A child wants to be the biggest or wants to jump the highest, or to have the longest hair.